The cold of winter settles over the quiet suburban neighborhood, blanketing it in a serene stillness. Inside a modest home, the warmth of a nursery glows softly from a nightlight shaped like a cloud, casting a gentle light over a crib filled with snug blankets. In the corner of the room lies Charlie, a large and dignified Rottweiler, his dark coat sleek and his attentive brown eyes ever watchful. Charlie is not just a family dog. He is a protector, a companion, and, to some, a hero. Once adopted by an elderly couple, Margaret and Thomas, from a local animal shelter, Charlie has become an inseparable part of their lives. When their son, Adam, and his wife, Lucy, welcomed their baby girl, Emily, into the world, Margaret and Thomas made a heartfelt decision. They gifted Charlie to Adam's growing family, believing Emily deserved both their love and the unwavering protection of a loyal friend. Margaret and Thomas visit often, their bond with both Charlie and little Emily clear in every smile and gentle pat. Margaret chuckles as Emily reaches her tiny hand out to grasp Charlie's ear, her soft giggle filling the room. Thomas watches with approval as Charlie sits quietly by the crib, a steadfast sentinel keeping his new family safe. "He's always been like that," Thomas remarks one evening. "Always watching, always ready." Life in the home follows a comforting rhythm. Lucy spends her mornings folding Emily's tiny clothes, arranging bottles, and humming lullabies that fill the house with a sense of peace. The faint aroma of warm milk lingers in the air. Adam spends his evenings reading near the fireplace or tinkering with small projects in the garage, often joined by Charlie, who lounges contentedly at his feet. Charlie, ever calm and composed, embraces his new role as Emily's guardian with quiet confidence. He nudges her toys toward her with his nose, wagging his tail softly when she giggles, as if encouraging her tiny bursts of laughter. At first, Charlie's transition into the household seems seamless. The family appreciates his steady presence, finding comfort in the way he moves through their routines, ever observant and dependable. But as the days turn into weeks, a subtle shift occurs. Charlie begins behaving differently around Emily's crib. The change is so slight at first that it escapes notice entirely. But then, on a cold and quiet night, Charlie barks, a sharp, startling sound that pierces the calm as Lucy rocks Emily to sleep. Startled, Lucy turns toward him. Charlie stands by the crib, his posture rigid, his ears perked, his eyes fixed on some point she cannot see. Adam brushes it off. "Probably just heard something outside," he says, patting Charlie's head. But Lucy feels a twinge of unease. The barking continues the next night, and the one after. At first, it is a single bark, then a low growl, but it soon grows into an insistent chorus. Every evening, as the household settles into its routine, Charlie positions himself near Emily's crib and begins his vigil. His growls are deep and steady, his eyes locked on a specific spot near the crib. On the fourth night, his barking becomes louder, filling the nursery with a tension that spreads through the household. Adam paces the hallway, frowning. "This is getting out of hand," he mutters, glancing toward the nursery. Lucy, cradling Emily, leans against the doorframe, her brow furrowed. "What's gotten into him?" she whispers, worry lacing her voice. By now, Charlie's behavior cannot be ignored. Lucy's unease grows as she watches him. Every night, he returns to the same spot by the crib, his barking sharp and unrelenting. His growls, low and guttural, seem almost like a warning. Lucy tries to calm him, running her hand along his sleek coat, but it does little to settle his growing agitation. The house, once so quiet and calm, now feels charged with an unseen tension. The nights are colder, the wind rattling the windows as if echoing Charlie's urgency. Then, on a particularly bitter night, Charlie's bark grows more desperate, refusing to wane. Lucy watches him from the nursery doorway, her fingers gripping the wooden frame tightly. Her breath fogs in the chilly air as her eyes dart between the crib and the dog. "Something's not right," she murmurs, her voice barely audible over the sound of Charlie's barking. Adam approaches, his face lined with concern. Lucy turns to him, her voice trembling. What is Charlie trying to tell us? Adam stands at the nursery door, staring at Charlie as the dog's barking echoes through the small room. Lucy cradles Emily, her movements slow and deliberate, as if the slightest misstep could unsettle the delicate balance of the moment. We need to figure this out, Adam says, his voice steady but low. He steps into the room, crouching next to Charlie. The dog pauses for a moment, his ears flicking toward Adam, but his posture remains tense. His nose brushes the edge of the crib, and then he barks again, loud and insistent. Over the next few nights, Adam and Lucy begin to observe Charlie more closely, determined to understand his strange behavior. During the day, he seems like his usual self, calm, watchful, and affectionate. He sits by Lucy as she feeds Emily, his tail wagging softly whenever the baby gurgles or laughs. He follows Adam to the garage in the evenings, his heavy steps a familiar comfort. But as night falls, the transformation begins. Charlie positions himself by the crib, his growls low and constant, his eyes fixed as if he can see something no one else can. The tension in the household grows. During one of Margaret and Thomas's regular visits, Lucy decides to bring up. She places a cup of steaming tea in Margaret's hands and sits across from her at the kitchen table, her fingers nervously tapping the edge of her mug. Charlie's been acting strange, she begins. Margaret looks up, her brow furrowing slightly. Strange how? Lucy explains the nightly barking, the way Charlie seems fixated on the crib. Margaret listens carefully, nodding slowly. He's always been protective, she says after a moment. But this sounds different. Encouraged by Margaret's concern, Lucy decides to consult Dr. Helen, the local veterinarian who has known Charlie since Margaret and Thomas adopted him. Dr. Helen greets Lucy warmly at the clinic, her white coat crisp and her demeanor calm. After a thorough examination, she assures Lucy that Charlie is in perfect health. Sometimes animals pick up on things we can't see or hear, Dr. Helen says gently. It could be behavioral, but it might also be his way of alerting you to something. Lucy nods, though the words do little to ease her unease. Back at home, Adam suggests moving Emily's crib to a different part of the nursery. Perhaps a new location will settle Charlie, he reasons. That evening, as Lucy watches from the doorway, Adam shifts the crib to the far side of the room, away from the nightlight's soft glow. Charlie follows the movement closely, his eyes sharp and his body alert. For a brief moment, the room falls quiet. Lucy lets out a small sigh of relief, until Charlie walks over to the new spot and begins barking again, louder than before. The days pass with little improvement. During a rare quiet moment, Lucy sits on the living room floor with Emily, gently shaking a rattle to make the baby giggle. Charlie lies nearby, his head resting on his paws, watching them intently. His eyes seem softer in the daylight, his usual calmness a stark contrast to the nights that have become fraught with tension. But even now, his ears twitch at the slightest sound, his gaze occasionally flicking toward the nursery. One evening, as Lucy feeds Emily in the rocking chair, Charlie suddenly stands and trots into the nursery. His nails click against the wooden floor, and a moment later, the sharp sound of his barking shatters the quiet. Lucy places Emily in the crib and rushes to find Adam. Together, they stand in the nursery, watching as Charlie begins pawing at the floor beneath the crib's new position. His movements are frantic, his whimpers filled with urgency. What is he doing now? Adam mutters, rubbing the back of his neck. Lucy crouches beside Charlie, placing a hand on his back. He's trying to tell us something, she says, her voice firm but tinged with worry. Adam sighs, glancing around the room. We've moved the crib. We've checked the area. What else could it be? Charlie lets out a low growl, his paw scratching at the floor again. Lucy looks up at Adam, her eyes filled with determination. We're missing something, she says quietly. And he's not going to stop until we figure out what it is. As the night deepens, Charlie's agitation only grows. His barking becomes more frequent, his focus unshakable. Lucy begins to feel the weight of exhaustion settling over her. She decides to sleep in the nursery, determined to see for herself what might be causing Charlie's distress. She lays on a small daybed, her eyes heavy, but every sound keeps her alert. The creak of the house settling, the soft rustle of Emily's blankets, and, most of all, Charlie's low growls. In the dim light of the room, Lucy watches as Charlie circles the crib, his nose brushing the floor. He pauses occasionally, his ears flicking towards sounds she cannot hear. The night feels endless, the cold seeping through the window panes. Finally, just before dawn, Charlie stops circling. He places both paws firmly on the floor beneath the crib and lets out a sharp bark, followed by a low whine. Lucy sits up, her heart pounding. Whatever is troubling him, it is clear he will not rest until they find the answer. The first rays of dawn filter through the nursery's curtains, casting pale light onto the wooden floor. Lucy rubs her eyes, stiff from a restless night spent on the small daybed. Charlie sits near the crib, his body tense, his gaze fixed on the floor beneath it. Adam enters quietly, carrying a steaming cup of coffee for Lucy. "Do you sleep at all?" he asks, glancing at the dog. Lucy shakes her head, her voice tired but resolute. "No. He's been like this all night. I think we need to take a closer look." Adam sets the coffee on a small table and crouches beside Charlie. The dog whines softly, his nose brushing the floor as if urging Adam to act. "Okay, buddy, let's see what's going on here," Adam mutters, reaching for a flashlight. He clicks it on, the beam illuminating the smooth floorboards beneath the crib. At first glance, everything seems normal. He sighs, sitting back on his heels. "I don't see anything." But Charlie barks sharply, pawing at the same spot with renewed urgency. Lucy moves closer, crouching beside Adam. "There's got to be something," she says, her tone firm. "He wouldn't act like this for no reason." Adam leans in again, the flashlight revealing a faint line where two floorboards meet. The seam is slightly wider than the others, almost imperceptible. "This," Adam says, pointing. "It's not quite flush." He presses on the board, and it shifts slightly under his hand. A sudden chill runs through the room, and Lucy pulls her sweater tighter around her shoulders. "Should we pull it up?" she asks. "I think we have to," Adam replies. He leaves briefly, returning with a small crowbar. Charlie steps back, watching intently as Adam wedges the tool into the seam and pries the board loose. A soft creak fills the room as the wood lifts, revealing a narrow gap beneath. Adam shines the flashlight into the opening, his brow furrowing. At first, the space seems empty, but as he peers closer, he spots small fragments, tiny scraps of food and shredded material. "It's a nest," he says, sitting back. Lucy stares at the opening, her hand covering her mouth. "A rodent nest?" she asks, her voice rising in alarm. Adam nods grimly. "Looks like it. Probably mice." Charlie growls softly, his eyes never leaving the gap. Lucy stands, her movements brisk. "We need to call pest control. Right away. What if there are more of them? What if they've been near Emily?" The discovery casts a shadow over the morning. The pest control service arrives within hours, their inspection confirming Adam's suspicion. A small infestation has taken root beneath the nursery floor, likely drawn in by the cold weather and the promise of warmth. The exterminator, a middle-aged man with a calm demeanor, explains the situation as he works. "You're lucky your dog picked up on this," he says, nodding toward Charlie, who watches the proceedings from the doorway. "Mice carry diseases. If this had gone unnoticed much longer, it could have been dangerous." Lucy glances at Emily, sleeping peacefully in the living room. Her chest tightens at the thought of the risk her daughter might have faced. She looks at Charlie, her expression softening. "He saved us," she murmurs, reaching down to scratch behind his ears. Charlie leans into her touch, his tail wagging faintly. Over the next few days, the pest control team works to eliminate the infestation and seal any entry points. The nursery is thoroughly cleaned, every corner inspected and disinfected. Adam and Lucy hover anxiously, ensuring no detail is overlooked. Charlie remains a constant presence, his watchful gaze tracking every movement. Margaret and Thomas visit during the process, their concern evident. "We never doubted him," Margaret says, her voice filled with quiet pride. Charlie's always been a smart one. As the nursery returns to its usual warmth and calm, the family begins to breathe easier. But the experience leaves its mark, especially on Adam. One evening, as he sits on the living room floor tossing a softball for Charlie, he pauses, the toy still in his hand. Charlie looks at him expectantly, his tail thumping against the carpet. "I owe you an apology," Adam says quietly. "I doubted you. Thought you were just being stubborn. But you knew, didn't you? You always know." Charlie tilts his head, his gaze unwavering, and Adam feels a pang of guilt. He tosses the ball, watching as Charlie bounds after it, his movements fluid and confident. Lucy watches from the couch, Emily nestled in her lap. "You're not the only one who doubted him," she says softly. "I kept thinking there had to be another explanation, but he was trying to protect her right from the start." The next morning, Lucy decides to rearrange Emily's room, moving the crib to a different position entirely and adding a new rug to cover the patched section of the floor. Charlie sniffs the area thoroughly, his tail wagging in approval. For the first time in weeks, he seems relaxed, his body losing the tension that had gripped him so tightly. That night, he curls up at the foot of the crib, his breathing steady, his posture calm. But the experience lingers in Lucy's mind. She watches Charlie closely, paying attention to his subtle cues, his quiet signals. "He's smarter than we give him credit for," she says to Adam one evening. "We just need to learn how to listen." The nursery feels warm again, the faint scent of lavender from a freshly washed blanket filling the air. Emily sleeps soundly in her crib, her tiny chest rising and falling in a gentle rhythm. Charlie lies nearby, his head resting on his paws, his body finally relaxed. The repairs to the floor are complete, and the pest control team has declared the house rodent-free. But even as life returns to normal, a lingering unease remains for Adam and Lucy. They can't shake the memory of how close they came to overlooking Charlie's warnings. Adam spends an evening reviewing every detail, crouching in the nursery with a flashlight long after Lucy has gone to bed. He examines the floorboards, the walls, even the space behind the crib. It's quiet now, with no sign of scratching or rustling, but Adam feels a need to double-check. As he works, Charlie stays by his side, occasionally nudging Adam's hand as if to reassure him. "I get it now," Adam murmurs, running his hand along Charlie's sleek fur. "You're not just watching, you're protecting." Lucy, meanwhile, takes a more reflective approach. She sits with Margaret during one of her parents' visits, her voice low, as she recounts the past few weeks. "It wasn't just the barking," she says, stirring her tea absent-mindedly. "It was how he wouldn't give up. Even when we didn't understand, he kept trying to tell us something." Margaret nods, her expression thoughtful. "Dogs have a way of knowing things we can't," she says. "They see the world differently. Maybe that's their gift to us, to notice what we don't." But the family's relief is short-lived. 2 nights after the repairs are completed, Charlie starts pacing in the nursery again. His movements are restless, his eyes darting toward the crib. Lucy notices first, sitting up in bed, as she hears the faint sound of his nails clicking against the wooden floor. "Adam," she whispers, shaking his shoulder. "He's doing it again." Adam groans, pushing the covers aside. "It's probably nothing," he mutters, but the doubt in his voice is clear. When they step into the nursery, Charlie stands by the crib, his body tense. He doesn't bark this time, but lets out a low, guttural growl. Adam kneels beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "What is it, boy?" he asks, his voice steady but concerned. Lucy watches from the doorway, clutching her robe tightly around her. "It can't be more rodents," she says, her voice wavering. "Can it?" Charlie circles the crib, his nose brushing the floor. Then he stops abruptly, his ears perking up. He paused at the patched section of the floor, the exact spot where the rodent nest had been discovered. Adam exchanges a worried glance with Lucy. "There's nothing left under there," he says, though the uncertainty in his tone betrays him. Charlie whines softly, his eyes fixed on the floor as if pleading for them to look again. The next morning, Lucy contacts the pest control service once more. The exterminator arrives with tools in hand, his expression a mix of curiosity and caution. "Didn't think I'd be back so soon," he remarks, kneeling to inspect the area. Adam and Lucy watch nervously as he works, his flashlight probing every crevice. After several minutes, he sits back on his heels, shaking his head. "No signs of rodents," he says. "The space is clean, sealed tight. Whatever's bothering your dog, it's not pests." The news brings little comfort. Adam and Lucy spend the rest of the day trying to decipher Charlie's behavior. They move the crib once more, rearranging the nursery to see if it makes a difference. But that evening, Charlie resumes his pacing, his unease growing more palpable. He alternates between the nursery and the hallway, his low growls echoing through the quiet house. Lucy finds herself sitting in the nursery again, her hands trembling slightly as she watches Charlie. "What are we missing?" she whispers aloud. By now, Charlie's behavior is affecting the entire household. Emily's sleep is disrupted, her soft cries pulling Lucy from bed at odd hours. Adam feels the strain too, his usual patience fraying as sleepless nights pile up. The once calm nursery feels heavier now, the warmth replaced by a sense of tension that neither parent can explain. Even Margaret and Thomas notice the change during their visits. "He's trying to tell you something," Margaret says firmly, her gaze fixed on Charlie. "Don't ignore him." The breakthrough comes unexpectedly one evening as Adam tinkers in the garage. He's sifting through old tools when his phone buzzes with a message from Lucy. It's a short, urgent text. "Come inside." Charlie's barking again. He drops the wrench he's holding and hurries back to the house, his heart pounding. As he steps into the nursery, he finds Lucy standing by the crib, her face pale. Charlie is barking, his body pressed against the wall near the patched floor. "He won't stop," Lucy says, her voice shaking. Adam grabs the flashlight from the table and crouches beside Charlie, shining the beam along the wall and floor. This time, he notices something he hadn't seen before, a faint crack running along the baseboard, almost hidden by the crib's position. He runs his hand over it, feeling a slight draft. "There's something here," he says, his voice steady but tense. Charlie's barking intensifies as Adam examines the crack. "We need to check this out," Adam says, standing. "Right now." Adam sets down the flashlight, his jaw tightening as he examines the faint crack along the baseboard. Charlie, still pressed against the wall, barks sharply, his tail stiff and his ears perked. Lucy stands by the crib, holding Emily close, her face pale with worry. "What do you think it is?" she asks, her voice trembling. Adam shakes his head. "I don't know," he replies, "but we're not ignoring it this time." The next day, Adam decides to remove the baseboard entirely. He gathers his tools, determined to uncover what lies behind it. Charlie stays close, watching Adam's every movement as he pries the wood loose. The crack reveals a narrow gap leading into the wall cavity, and as Adam shines his flashlight inside, he catches a glint of something metallic. Reaching in cautiously, he pulls out a small, tarnished box, its surface covered in a thin layer of dust. Lucy gasps softly as she kneels beside him, cradling Emily in one arm. "What is it?" she asks. Adam brushes off the dust, revealing intricate engravings on the box's surface. It looks old, its hinges rusted but intact. With a careful hand, Adam opens the box. Inside, they find a collection of faded photographs, a child's bracelet, and a folded letter, its edges yellowed with age. "This must have been left here years ago," Adam murmurs, holding up one of the photographs. It shows a smiling family standing in front of the house, their clothes suggesting a time decades past. Lucy peers over his shoulder, her expression softening. "It's a piece of history," she says quietly. "Someone's story." As they sift through the contents of a box, Charlie lies down beside them, his tail wagging gently as if content that the mystery has been solved. Adam and Lucy decide to share the discovery with the local historical society, ensuring the items are preserved and their story remembered. "It's amazing to think this was hidden here all this time," Lucy says as they pack the items carefully. "And we never would have found it without Charlie." In the days that follow, the house feels lighter, as if a weight has been lifted. Charlie returns to his usual calm demeanor, resting by Emily's crib each night without a single bark or growl. Margaret and Thomas visit again, their faces lighting up as they hear the story of the discovery. "That dog of yours," Thomas says with a chuckle, scratching Charlie behind the ears. "He's got better instincts than most people." Margaret nods, her gaze warm as she watches Emily play on the living room floor, Charlie lying protectively nearby. "You made the right choice bringing him into your family," she says. "He's more than a pet. He's part of your story now." As winter transitions into spring, the household settles into a new rhythm. Emily grows more curious each day, her tiny hands reaching for everything within her grasp. Charlie remains her steadfast guardian, his gentle eyes watching over her every move. Adam and Lucy, meanwhile, find themselves more attuned to their home, noticing its quirks and hidden details in a way they hadn't before. One evening, as the sun sets and the house falls quiet, Adam and Lucy sit together on the couch. Emily sleeps soundly in her crib, and Charlie rests at their feet, his body relaxed. "He really is remarkable," Lucy says, reaching down to stroke Charlie's fur. Adam nods, a small smile playing on his lips. "He's more than remarkable," he replies. "He's family." The sense of peace that settles over the household feels earned, a culmination of trust, patience, and understanding. Charlie remains ever watchful, his presence a constant source of comfort and protection. On the rare occasions when he perks his ears or lets out a soft growl, Adam and Lucy listen immediately, trusting him completely. In the final moments of the day, Emily stirs slightly in her crib, letting out a soft sigh before settling back into sleep. Charlie lifts his head briefly, his eyes scanning the room, then lays back down, his breathing steady. The nursery is quiet, the warm glow of the nightlight casting gentle shadows on the walls. For the first time in weeks, the house feels completely at peace. And in that stillness, as the family rests together, one thought lingers in Lucy's mind. Animals have their own way of speaking, their own way of protecting. And sometimes, all it takes is listening to truly understand.